Racial Harmony Day. When we think about racial harmony in Singapore, we think about harmony between the four main races of Singapore: the Chinese, who speak Mandarin, the Malays, who speak Malay, the Indians, who speak Tamil, and the others. But if we look more closely at these racial classifications, we will find that it's actually not so simple. There are more than four kinds of people in Singapore. For example, among the Indians, not only do you have Tamils, you also have Bengalis, Punjabis, people who speak Urdu and Hindi, Gujarati, Malayalam, Sinhalese, and other Indian languages. And these also represent groups of people who have slightly different cultures, although they're all classified as Indians. Among the Malays, not only do you have the Orang Melayu, but you also have Minangkabaus. For example, Lieutenant Adnan, who fought at Bukit Chandu, he was a Minangkabau. You have Banjars, Bataks, Bugis, Boyanese, and Javanese.
Hi, you'll be surprised to know that I am Javanese. Both my parents were Javanese. They came from the islands of Java. When we were little, we were very much exposed to the language, but we took no interest because there was no use for it in school. However, at home, we were very exposed to it because my grandparent, as in my grandmother, will speak to my mother in Javanese, so we pick up bits and snippets. So when the Javanese meet, they don't say, "How are you?" like we do it in English, but they will ask, "Have you eaten?" which sounds like this: "Wes mangan?" And then the answer is "Wes." Even if you have not eaten, just say yes. And I can count in Javanese from 1 to 10. It goes like this: Siji, loro, telu, papat, lima, enam, pitu, wolu, sanga, sepuluh. See you again.
And all of these people are classified as Malays. And among the Chinese, you have the Hakkas, Hainanese, Fuchaos, Cantonese, Hokkiens.
Count in Hokkien, numbering 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Teochews.
Good morning, children. This is Sister May with me. Okay, Sister May and I, we belong to the Chinese, but our dialect group is the Teochew. Okay, so we are going to show you or say some words in Teochew for you to listen to.
So this is how you count to 10 in Teochew. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
So that is 1 to 10 in Teochew.
And can you tell us some differences between Teochew and Hokkien? Auntie May, you were telling me just now, how do you say tabletop in Teochew?
Okay. Table for table is Teochew is chung teng.
Chung teng.
Then Hokkien is to teng.
See, so there's some differences between Hokkien and Teochew. On the 21st of July, schools in Singapore commemorate Racial Harmony Day to mark the anniversary of the 1964 racial riots in Singapore. On the 21st of July 1964, racial riots broke out between the Chinese and the Malays in Singapore. In the July riots, 23 people were killed, and later on the same year, in September, there was another set of riots in which 13 people were killed. So in 1964, altogether, 36 people were killed in racial riots between the Malays and the Chinese. But these were not the biggest and most serious racial riots in Singapore's history. Long before that, there was another much more serious set of riots, and it did not involve the Malays. It was riots between the Hokkiens and the Teochews, two different groups of Chinese. This happened in 1854, and altogether, around 500 people were killed in these Hokkien-Teochew riots. To understand why the 1854 Hokkien-Teochew riots happened, we need to find out a bit more about the history of the Chinese in Singapore. 2 weeks after Sir Thomas Stamford Raffles landed on Singapore in February 1819, he wrote a letter in which he mentioned that there were already some industrious Chinese who were established in the interior of the island, and he expected that soon they would be able to supply vegetables to his settlement. These were probably Teochew farmers from the Riau Islands in Indonesia. The Teochews were mainly farmers growing gambia, and there were also some Hokkiens in the Riau Islands, and they were mostly merchants. So the first Chinese who settled Singapore Island and who were already here when Raffles landed were probably Teochews.
Now these Teochew settlements had names like Gangka. Gangka means the foot of the river, because if you look at the upper part of the river where several streams meet together, it looks like the foot of a bird, so they call it Gangka. Gangka is now the name of an LRT station in Punggol, which was near the former village of Gangka on the Serangoon River. Other Teochew settlements had names like Yo Chu Kang, or Chua Chu Kang, or Lim Chu Kang. And in the olden days, there were many other Chu Kang names, like Chan Chu Kang, which is up Sembawang Road here. Chan Chu Kang later was named Yisun. And also Tan Chu Kang, Boko Kang, and Ao Kang. The Chu Kang part in Teochew means the back part of the river, or the upper part of the river. In those days, there were very few roads on Singapore Island, so most of the transport was by means of boats on the river. So the Teochew settlements grew up along the rivers, and they had names like Chu Kang. So Yo Chu Kang was the name of a Teochew village near the gambia and pepper plantations along the Seletar River. And it was controlled by a Kangchu, by a river lord of the Yo family, hence Yo Chu Kang, okay, the Chu Kang belonging to Yo.
But once Raffles set up the trading settlement in 1819, the merchants started to come to trade, and these merchants were mostly Hokkiens. They came from the Riau Islands, from other parts of Indonesia, and from Malacca. And soon there was some rivalry, some competition that built up between the Hokkiens and the Teochews. And what sparked off the riot in 1854 was a disagreement between a Hokkien shop owner selling rice and a Teochew customer who was buying the rice. They disagreed over the price of rice, and a fight broke out. And eventually, in these riots, around 500 people were killed before peace could be restored. But let's go and find out about how racial harmony was re-established between the Hokkiens and the Teochews.
And I'm here at Toa Payoh West to look for the grave of Mr. Seah Yu Chin, one of the Teochew leaders who helped to put an end to the 1854 Hokkien-Teochew riots, one of the worst racial riots in Singapore's history, in which over 500 people died. Seah Yu Chin's grave is on a hill called Grave Hill that is near Toa Payoh West. This area now is partly a construction site for a new MRT station on the Thomson line near Caldecott, part of Caldecott. And it is also near the Singapore Labour Foundation buildings. And near there is this patch of forest, which used to be formerly a rubber plantation belonging to Mr. Seah Yu Chin. So I'm going to go inside there now and look for his grave. Now here, I have something interesting. This is a piece of a gambia plant. The early Teochew settlers in Singapore were mostly growing gambia and pepper. This is a gambia plant, and you can recognize a gambia plant because it has these hooks. It's a climbing plant, and it uses these hooks. Don't know if you can see here. These hooks on the stem to help to hook onto other plants, like a hook over here. Help to hook onto other plants so that it can climb up on other plants. Now the Teochews grew gambia because the sap of the gambia could be processed into a material that was used in Chinese medicine. And later on, the Europeans discovered that gambia also could be used for tanning leather, for making leather brown and processing animal skins to make leather. So it became a very valuable cash crop. So this area around here, the land was owned by Mr. Seah Yu Chin, and he owned one of the biggest gambia plantations in Singapore at that time. So this is a clue that we're getting near to him. There's one brick over there. This is a brick. Pile of bricks here. The edge of a stone structure. And up there, I can just see the edge of Mr. Seah's tomb. Somebody has built a staircase here, probably his relatives, because last year they found out where this place was. Someone helped them to find it. Mr. Goh helped them to find it, and they've come here to clean up Mr. Seah's grave. So you can see here there's a wall. This is an old wall of his tomb.
Here's another wall under this thorn tree, Nibong palm. And there, we're finally here. This is the tomb of Mr. Xia Yuqin. This shows you how big Mr. Xia's tomb is. His tombstone is taller than I am. This is the tomb of Mr. Xia Yuqin, one of the Teochew leaders in Singapore, who helped to bring an end to the 1854 Hokkien-Teochew riots, one of the worst racial riots in Singapore's history. Mr. Xia negotiated on the part of the Teochews because he was a leader for the Teochew community. For the Hokkiens, the spokesman was Mr. Tan Kim Ching, the son of Mr. Tan Tock Seng. And Mr. Tan Kim Ching is buried about 1 kilometer away in that direction. We'll go and see him in a while. I'm here at Bukit Brown's Chinese cemetery, one of the largest Chinese cemeteries outside of China, to visit the grave of Mr. Tan Kim Ching, who is buried about 1 kilometer away from Mr. Xia Yuqin, who's buried in Toa Payoh. Okay, here with me is Dr. Lim Su Min, who is a descendant of Tan Tock Seng. You may have heard of Tan Tock Seng because there's a hospital named after him, Tan Tock Seng Hospital. Dr. Lim, could you tell us a bit more about who Tan Tock Seng was?
Tan Tock Seng was a Peranakan from Malacca, and early 1900s when Singapore became a trading post after Raffles founded Singapore, he came to Singapore and started business, and he became very successful and even developed a trade between Singapore and Siam. And he had a son, Tan Kim Ching, who is buried here. And his son Kim Ching also developed, continued the business between Singapore and Siam, and he was also responsible for heading the Chinese community and being in charge of the Hokkien community.
I read somewhere that in the 1854 Hokkien-Teochew riots, he had a role to play.
Yes, I think he also had good relationships with the Teochew community, and there was Mr. Xia Yuqin, who was one of his friends. And when the riots broke out, the British approached him to help to mediate peace settlement. And because of his relationship between the Teochew community and the Hokkien community, I think it was a successful result.
So I suppose that was one way in which he helped to bring harmony between the Hokkiens and the Teochews on account of his influence. Was he always buried here in Bukit Brown?
No, actually he was originally buried in the 13th Mile Changi, and we have a picture of the original grave site, and you can see a set of 6 stone statues, 4 Qilin and 2 elephants, which are very reminiscent of the Thai royalty animals. So subsequently in 1940s, it was transferred from the family plot to this site, and the headstone is similar, but these animals disappeared, and we think that they are in front of the National Museum.
That's interesting. And I understand he also has a road named after him, is that right?
Yes, there's a Kim Chin Road in Jiangwa.
And coincidentally, it's quite near to Yuqin Street as well, which is named after the Teochew person who negotiated with him during the Hokkien-Teochew riots.
That's right, that's right.
Thank you very much. So there you see Yuqin Street, which is named after Xia Yuqin, the Teochew leader. And very short distance away from Yuqin Street is Kim Cheng Street. So it is quite fitting that Xia Yuqin and Tan Kim Ching have roads named after them that are very close together, because these were 2 of the Chinese leaders who helped to bring an end to the 1854 Hokkien-Teochew riots, which were one of the worst racial riots in Singapore's history.